afternoon, I'm Rachel Hopkins and this is Liz Cairns. We are joined today by Christina Rees, the Shadow Secretary of State for Wales, and Rob Stewart, the leader of Swansea Council.
Well, thank you both for coming. Of course, today is a special day for the Labour Party calendar as it's the birthday of Cllr Harding.
I know that we've got some footage, a nice tribute to Cllr Harding, so let's take a look at that.
All across the UK, we see streets, schools and sports clubs named after Cllr Harding, the great founder of the Scottish Labour Party in 1888. His name might not have the same recognition as Clement Attlee, because he was never Prime Minister, but without him, we would not have had our NHS, the welfare state as we know it, or laws which recognise the right of everyone to be treated equally, regardless of race, religion, gender or sexuality. When Cllr Harding stood for Parliament in Lanarkshire in 1888, working people had no representation in the corridors of power. Cllr Harding changed that when he was first elected in 1892, and he changed it for good. He supported the women's suffrage movement, he stood on a platform of fair rents and rights for workers. Cllr Harding proved that normal working people working together can make a difference and can change our country. It was Cllr who decided working families needed political representation and a political voice who could change their lives for the better. An internationalist, a socialist and a pioneer. The best way to celebrate Cllr Harding is to keep his values right at the heart of the Labour Party. And as your leader, that's what I intend to do.
Such a powerful video, isn't it? It just reminds us of everything that he's brought for us and did.
And that's where it all began. He did a lot of work for the working man and the NHS and woman. Of course, with the suffragettes movement, he supported those. He had such clear visions and he went against the grain on so many things. How do you think he would have, what do you think he would have said, seeing how the Labour Party has progressed through the years and how it is today?
Well, he was an independent MP first of all, and then he founded the Labour Party and became our first Labour MP for Merthyr, and I'm sure there'll be lots of events in Merthyr to celebrate. And Keir Starmer, who leads on us for Brexit, is actually named after Cllr Harding.
Oh gosh.
And he's quite an inspirational man himself, you know. But I think that if Cllr Harding would have looked at the progression of the Labour Party, he would have been proud of our values. He was a champion for social justice, Rob, wasn't he? And
yeah, absolutely. And you know, I think the point is we wouldn't have the representational democracy that we've got in this country now if it wasn't for what he changed in his day. So, you know, it was basically the gentry that were in charge then, and you know, working people, ordinary people didn't have a voice, and I think that's what he gave to us, and you know, that out of that grew the Labour movement, and of course the politics of today.
What must it have been like for the working person before Cllr Harding sort of stepped up and said, look, changes need to be made, these people have voices and need to be heard? As you say, it was the gentry. What do you think it would have been like? I mean, obviously we're just surmising, before Cllr Harding took charge.
Probably oppression would have continued because there was the ruling class and there was the working class, and the ruling class just decided everything. So there was no democratic voice, there was no democratic accountability, and that's what we have today, and many people, I think, take that for granted, Rob.
I don't think any of us would be sitting on the sofa today if it wasn't for those changes.
Not.
Definitely not. So yes, I mean, you know, look, we often take things that we have for granted. But remember, most of the things that we enjoy today came through struggle, came through people standing up and saying this isn't right, and putting their lives on the line offer to change things. So
And Cllr Hardy was also a trade unionist, and it's important to remember that the Labour Party and the trade union movement grew together. The Labour Party came out of the trade union movement, and I think Cllr Hardy organised the first ever strike, and the bosses could see what he was achieving and backed off. So that was an achievement for him.
He was a very brave man, wasn't he? He went completely against the grain on so many different matters. And at that time, as you say, previously it was just the gentry. So it must have been quite a scary time for him to, what might have happened. I mean, luckily he was successful in implementing so many things.
He had so much passion in him to do it, though. You'd have to have that passion, determination, definitely.
Mm.
Well, we're all very grateful to him, and also on this day we've got India's Independence Day, so another big day today, and we've got a tribute to him as well. It is Art Mallet, a very well-known actor, and he's doing the speech that Katachi did on the day of India's independence, so we'll take a little look at that as well.
If we want to make this great state of Pakistan happy and prosperous, we should concentrate solely and wholly on the well-being of the people, especially the masses and the poor. If you will work in cooperation, forgetting the past, burying the hatchet, you are bound to succeed. If you change your past and work together in a spirit that every one of you, no matter what community he belongs to, no matter what relation he had with you in the past, no matter what it is, colour, caste or creed, is first, second and last a citizen of this state, with equal rights, privileges and obligations. There is no end to the progress that you will make. You are free. You are free to go to your temples. You are free to go to your mosques or any other place of worship in this state of Pakistan. You may belong to any religion or caste or creed. That has nothing to do with the business of the state. We are starting with this fundamental principle that we are all citizens, all equal citizens in the one state.
It's a very powerful speech and a very positive speech as well, but of course it wasn't so great for everybody. A lot of people were split up, families were split up, and also romantic people had met, fallen in love. There's quite a lot of stories out there of people that weren't able to stay together. But a big day for India. And what do you think? I mean, the speech there was very optimistic. Do you think that he would have been pleased at the way that things have evolved for India?
I think it's terribly complicated, isn't it, as you've just alluded to. And what I was listening very carefully to the words, and aren't those values the same as our socialist values? What he was saying were the same values Cllr Hardy had, and the same values that we have today.
I was thinking that.
It's all about, it's all about equality and people having the right to freedom of choice, freedom of free speech, and I think it's a global value that we must all aspire to.
And do you think it's improving as time goes on, or getting worse? And why is it so difficult to create this equality when so many great people have made big?
I think that it is getting better. There is a momentum that continues where you've seen the awful events in Charlottesville recently. I think the reaction to that has been outstanding around the world. People saying, actually, no, we don't want to behave like that. That's unacceptable. And when you look back at what happened in 1947, both in Pakistan and in India, the atrocities created that occurred on both sides as people were forcibly removed and put in another country. I think certainly things have improved since then. There's a long way to go. We ain't at the end of that journey yet. But I think globally, especially with social media and everything now, I think it's, you know, people can make their views clear very quickly about what they expect in terms of standards of behaviour, in terms of moral code, etc. like that. And I think you know, when people like Donald Trump refuse to condemn the sorts of thing that went on, you know, the public immediately tell them that's unacceptable. I think previously you probably would have taken a while to get that, and I just think we are getting to a point now where we're becoming much more, you know,
Definitely.
vocal.
Thank you both. Next up, we'll be taking a look at the papers, and our Labour Party crew will be joined by Conservative Suzy. Suzy Davies AM for South Wales West, Christina Rees, the Shadow Secretary of State for Wales, and Rob Stewart, the leader of Swansea Council. So, thank you all for joining me. Shall we start with the papers?
Yeah.
In the Daily Telegraph and the Daily Mail, they both covering Big Ben, which next Monday will be stopped. And they have written backlash over the silences of Big Ben. MPs' protests at Chimes been put out of action for 4 years to protect workmen. Daily Mail, death knell for common sense. Big Ben silence for 4 years to protect workers' hearing. Yes, it's all down to health and safety. Now, it is all down to health and safety. When I first read the highlights, I was thinking, oh, it's a bit OTT. But then when you go into it and you look into it, basically what they're doing is the Elizabeth Tower, which the Big Ben is housed in, that is going to have work done onto it. So if you can imagine, what's your views on it? Because what they're saying is, for their years, if they're in there and that chime is going off, obviously it is going to damage their ears. What are your views? Because I know a lot of people have said they're against it.
Well, I think health and safety is paramount, really. And Rob, as leader of Swansea Council, it's paramount for you in everything you do. So health and safety-wise, I can perfectly understand that. But, I mean, Big Ben is such a tourist attraction. And people come from all over the world just to look at it and take photos of it. But I understand, is it going back on for the turn of the New Year?
New Year, yes.
It's going back on for that, so...
Yes. But only that, though. So.
Yeah. It'll be really quiet when I get back there in September.
That's what I was going to say, because you're obviously used to it. Yeah, would it be strange?
Very strange, yeah.
What's your thoughts, Susan?
Seriously, I think people need to get a grip. If actually health and safety is what matters here, then that is paramount. That's not a party political statement at all. It seems quite a long time that it's going to be out of action, though. Maybe they could look at speeding that up a little bit. But you know, the Palace of Westminster is basically falling down, isn't it? So it needs to be repaired. That's far more important in the long run than perhaps 4 years out for Big Ben. And in a digital era, if they can't make alternative arrangements, shall we say, for people to hear the bongs somewhere else, then well, maybe someone should put their thinking cap on for that one as well.
We have got a video, Big Ben. Should we just remind ourselves and what you're going to be missing when you go back, Christina?
Take a good look. Soon it'll be gone. For years, covered up with scaffolding and ugly plastic sheets. And as for this, we'll miss it, surely. Try to imagine this without Big Ben. OK, like a lot of the palace, the clock tower at Westminster, that's Elizabeth Tower, and Big Ben, that's the bell, is broken. Worn out anyway. Needs repairs and a good clean-up. Not for the first time.
This must be mended or every MP will have to be issued with a reinforced umbrella.
For the last 10 years, Charles King has toiled up the stairs to wind it 3 times a week.
And we've been allowed inside the most famous clock tower in the world to see what's about to become a truly one-of-a-kind repair job. That's after we get up these 334 stone stairs. 334.
Obviously, you can see some of the repairs that need to be done and that, so it obviously is important.
I got to say, I fail to get enthusiastic about, you know, the story about 4 years of not having chimes. In the great scheme of things, is it really that important for a front page on the Daily Mail? But I think it just says a lot about the London press, doesn't it, you know?
Yes.
And the distorted view of life.
Yeah. Well, moving on, shall we? As you've just said now.
Sorry,
Or moving on.
Moving on. That's right. In the Telegraph, Japanese fungus spreads through hospital wards. Now, like you said, there are other issues which are more pressing. The Public Health England have set out a safety alert due to this drug-resistant Japanese fungus. It's named Candida auris. It began in Japan in 2009 in the ear canal of a 70-year-old woman. But the concerns are, if you already have an autoimmune and it's suppressed and you do catch this, then 6 out of 10 people can actually die of it. So this is a concern because there isn't anything that can actually cure it. And your body, obviously, if your immune system's low, won't be able to fight it. But what they have said, the only things that they can do is to you know, you see them as you walk in and you leave, is to wash your hands vigorously, which we all know we need to do. But I think if something like this is, if there's an actual alert, we automatically will do it. So what do you all think in that respect?
Well, it's sort of quite scary, I think. But this is only in England at the moment?
The hospitals so far have only mentioned England. One intensive care unit in England actually had to close for 2 weeks, so showing the urgency of everything needing to be sorted right now. It's nothing has come down to Wales, but it's gone global. So obviously it can easily come to us. It's not as if it's sectioned just to England.
So the procedure is they are containing it and then shutting down hospitals, if needs be, just to contain it so it doesn't spread then?
Yes, yeah, definitely. Because you can be a carrier and not realise and not actually have any
symptoms?
Yes, yes, this is the concern, and this is how then it will spread and how it has actually spread.
Well, the NHS on both sides of the Severn Bridge here should actually be well equipped to deal with this now because of progress made against MRSA and C. diff in the past. The sort of awareness of the spread of infection and disease is far greater than it's ever been. I suppose the main concern here is there doesn't seem to be a direct response to it in terms of, well, I don't suppose it would be antibiotic necessarily, would it, if it's a fungal infection? But maybe that's where the concentrated effort needs to be now, so that it's contained in that way, as well as taking the usual precautions that you know, we were just talking about.
It has been likened to a superbug. We have a video showing and explaining more about the superbug for other people as well to understand. Should you have a look? It's not that nice.
The drug-resistant infections are set to kill over 10 million people across the world by 2050. That's more than currently die from cancer. And according to a new report, the trend is set to get worse. But what exactly is a superbug? Examples are E. coli, malaria and TB, which have the biggest impact. They have a bacteria that can carry genes that allow it to survive exposure to antibiotics. This means that infections caused by the bacteria are harder to treat, despite them not necessarily being more severe or infectious. The most concerning thing is that the gene that carries antibiotic resistance can be passed between bacteria, allowing for the creation of bacteria that carry resistance genes to many different antibiotics. The report by economist Jim O'Neill says that the costs of treating sufferers would spiral to £63 trillion, which is the equivalent of around 35 years without UK contribution to the global economy. Politicians and scientists have warned of the desperate need to find a cure for infections that have become resistant.
I think it's even more worrying when you listen to that. And I think it shows how serious it is, to be honest with you.
There was an item a few weeks ago about people's resistance to antibiotics and that they should be used sparingly. But some research then came out and said that you shouldn't finish the course, which we were always advised to. But then there was a backlash then, and a doctor came on and said, no, you've got to finish the course, otherwise they don't work. So I think that we're discovering new things about antibiotics and resistance and all the time. And we need to keep pace, you know, with that. Yes, there are going to be new bugs coming in, but we need to be aware and alert to that and then respond accordingly.
I think that's a fair point, actually. I mean, there's been perhaps an era where antibiotics were prescribed perhaps a little bit too freely. Any of us remember taking our kids to the surgery, will remember, you know, what kind of antibiotic do you want, as opposed to, can I not have an antibiotic? What do I need to do? Sort of approach. I think that's improved, though, in all fairness. Doctors seem a bit more aware of that. I suppose there's a wider question as well about, you know, these diseases come from all over the world. In developing countries, do they actually need more antibiotic assistance with some things rather than what we've got at the moment, which is let's go to the surgery for our antibiotic?
Yeah, definitely. Like you said, they have changed the rulings now. You can't just automatically go to the doctor, my child has a cold.
Yes.
And I think parents did. I think they panicked so much. They thought antibiotics covered everything and would help everything.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think it's just the way we were brought up like that, really. When we take the antibiotics, it'll be better. Whereas then they were like, no. antibiotics will not cure a cold or even flu unless it goes onto your chest. So things have changed and progressed.
Yeah, and it's important as well, because we spend a lot on prescription medicine in Wales and the rest of the UK, really, and if we can be careful with it, that's got to be better for everybody, surely.
Yeah, definitely. Well, hopefully things will change and there'll be more research into, like you said, the newer like some bacteria that are coming out. But thank you all for joining me. Later, I won't actually be back. Rachel will be back. See you then.
Welcome back. I'm Rachel Hopkins and I'm joined by Suzy Davies AM for South Wales West, Christina Rees, the Shadow Secretary of State for Wales, and Rob Stewart, the leader of Swansea Council. Hello all. Thank you for coming in today, and we're talking about the fact that a statement's been made by Andrew R.T. Davies that Brexit minister needed for Wales's interest in the EU exit. So talking about Wales in specific when it comes to Brexit, but we've got a little piece where he explains what he thinks, and then we can talk about it. Let's take a look.
Is Brexit a job share? Or is it so important that obviously it has its dedicated minister and department dealing with it, such as the Scottish Government have identified and the Westminster Government have identified the need to have a Brexit department? And what I'm saying is that I think the negotiating position of the Welsh Government and indeed Wales within the discussions would be enhanced by having a minister totally dedicated and focused with a support team around him or her in those negotiations. We don't have that at the moment because everyone else is wearing 101 different hats who sit around the table on Wales's behalf.
So Suzy, what do you think about what we've just seen?
Well, I think it is an important point to make, actually, and it's been made cross-party, actually, in the committee that I sit on in the Assembly, which we shorthand, we call it the Brexit Committee, because that's all we seem to be talking about at the moment. And it's the observation is made in a positive way, in as much as we recognise that the First Minister of Wales and the Cabinet Secretary for Finance and Local Government, two heavyweight departments that are already involved in a series of quite big legislative changes at the moment, really do they have the time to focus on a Brexit and Brexit alone? And I think the conclusion is no. So it's not critical of the individuals involved. It's just an observation that in trying for Wales to get its message into the UK's negotiating position, it's selling itself a little bit light, really.
And what would you like to see put in place as part of the committee moving forward in the Brexit exit for Wales?
Well, one of the suggestions that I actually made to Welsh Government is that the Economic Development Cabinet Secretary perhaps might want to take this on as a primary role rather than the Finance and Local Government spokesperson, simply because at the end of this, whatever the exit from the European Union looks like, our trade needs to be working and functioning and helping things like the City deal really sort of move on rather than prove a block to it. So if not him, that's a chap called Ken Skates, somebody else to take sole responsibility for this and actually make our Assembly, which holds the Welsh Government to account, have one stream of one route into helping Welsh Government formulate a position that can take into the UK Government.
We've been talking about the City deal here on Bay TV, and how do you feel that it is going to fare with the Brexit?
Well, like everything else in the country at the present time, it's affected or impacted by Brexit because of the uncertainty of Brexit. I mean, I pick up on Suzy's point. I mean, I think Suzy's saying it's a request or an observation, but actually it's an inconsistent one because up until the election where, you know, Theresa May went to the country for a mandate, didn't get it, you know, R.T. Davies and the other Conservatives were saying this is for the UK government to do and Wales should, you know, go along with it. Now we've got a First Minister pushing forward and trying to get Wales's voice heard. They want somebody else to do it. It's a pretty inconsistent picture. And, you know, it just reflects really the chaos that's taking place in London at the moment, where you've got the Chancellor and the Brexit Secretary, both of whom barely talk to each other, can barely come together to agree on any point of principle with Brexit. It's, you know, I would like to see Carwyn Jones doing the negotiations on behalf of the UK, to be honest with you, rather than the people we've got there at the moment.
Would that be too big a job, though? Because, of course, we are talking about somebody specifically going in.
I think, you know, Carwyn and Mark, they work as a team. Mark sits on the Joint Ministerial Committee representing Carwyn. Carwyn's a leader, a very good leader. He's been over to Brussels many times and spoken to the negotiators over there. We also have Cllr Starmer, who's our negotiator from the MP's perspective, and he said that before the general election he was having trouble getting people to meet him, and after the general election everybody wants to meet him. So they're looking at perhaps there'll be a Labour government, so Cllr Starmer will be doing the negotiation from the UK government's point of view in the near future. But I think that, you know, is this another ploy by R.T. Davies to raise his profile? I don't know.
Interesting that he recommends Carwyn Jones, who's a different party. Do you think there should be a mix of party in this team moving forward?
Can I come back on that
Yes.
then? Because first of all, it's a mistake to say that Carwyn Jones has been to Brussels many times. Our committee actually found that he hadn't been there as many times as perhaps he ought to. And to compare with the officials, shall we say, in Ireland, who were delighted to see our Assembly committee because they hadn't seen a representative from Welsh Government, they couldn't quite understand where the Welsh Government were in all this, because despite visits to Norway, they didn't feel that they were, considering they're our next neighbours and our best economic neighbours, if you like, where the Welsh Government had been in this. In terms of all views being represented in the UK's negotiating position, I think the more people who contribute to that, the better. But actually, the Welsh Government has not made it easy for people to contribute to that suggestion. I mean, for example, when they put their white paper together with Plaid Cymru, neither UKIP nor the Welsh Conservatives were included in those discussions at all. So if Carwyn Jones wants to move beyond his white paper, he really needs to start looking at actually a little bit more cross-party and hearing from certainly from the private sector, which, as far as I can tell from our Assembly Committee meetings, have been not at the forefront, shall we say, of discussions on the negotiating position.
And is there anybody that you think would be perhaps a better fit for this job role?
Well, Welsh Government is small because the Assembly is small. I mean, I don't have a strong view on who that should be. I mean, I mentioned perhaps I would like to see the Economy Secretary take it forward, but I don't have a strong view on who that be. But it does need someone to take sole responsibility, to be the go-to person on this, which we don't have at the moment.
So I find it interesting that so many people in Wales did vote to leave Brexit, even though we had so much funding from the EU and there's so many plans to move Swansea forward. Do you think people in Wales understood exactly what was going to happen? Do any of us understand what's going to happen with the, leaving the...
No, I mean, look, I've said when I've been on the programme previously that I think for a long time people were sold a version of the truth by the press, by some of the political commentators, by some of the politicians themselves who had an agenda of getting us at any cost out of the European Union, and many of those are in Suzy's party.
And others,
but
including the Labour Party.
Largely your party. And then, David Cameron went to the country with a big gamble, lost that gamble. Theresa May has then gone to the country again with an election gamble, lost that gamble. This has been about internal Tory party politics and getting that right, rather than getting what's best for the country right.
I thought it was about people of Wales voting the way they did, which is not about this at all.
I think the context is important.
But it was very interesting just over the weekend. There was an article in the Telegraph where Hammond seems to have aligned himself with Liam Fox. Well, if you'd looked last week, that was never going to happen. Theresa May's on holiday, and things happen when she's on holiday, as we know. She gets ideas and her cabinet get ideas when she's not around.
I think that's a misrepresentation of what Prime Ministers do. I mean, there's 24/7, as indeed a Labour Prime Minister would have been. In terms of your original question, though, I think it would be fair to say that even though Wales got a lot of money through European funding sources, if you like, it wasn't always apparent to the people who benefited from that. So we had big infrastructures. Roads would be a pretty good example, and so this isn't a party point in any way. It wasn't always apparent that the big money for that came via the European Union, and so and certainly funding that came into the valleys that we all represent actually didn't necessarily feel that any benefits they were getting were through the European route. So there's a misunderstanding about where a lot of that money came from, and a lot of that, I have to say, was because when things were opened, when launches were done, it was always a Labour politician standing there and saying, look what we've done, as opposed to actually most of this money, or half this money, came from the European Union.
So ideally,
I think there are lots of signs about, if you look all over Wales, there are lots of European signs, saying exactly what funding.
But at least the money came from Europe. I mean, like electrification, where we've had £400 million taken away from us by the Tory government in London. Is that money going to come back? And if so, when?
Well, more importantly, it's about the speed of the trains and the message that's giving. And as far as I can see, the decision that was made a few weeks ago means that there's no difference to the speed of the trains. And I would much rather see that money go into something else.
So that money is going
to... the billion pounds, didn't that go to the DUP to prop the Conservative government up?
And I think if Jeremy Corbyn had been in a position to be anything like Prime Minister, he'd have needed the help as well. So I think that's a false argument and always has been.
Oh, I don't know. I think we'll probably win the election next time, Rob. What do you think?
I hope he's got a long wait.
So obviously we've got the plans that we spoke about yesterday in the city centre. this seems that it's sort of going to be starting very, very shortly.
Yep.
Are there likely to be holds up because of not being able to go and negotiate in Brexit, or is it going to just continue?
No. I mean, being very clear that we're not seeking European money for any of the schemes that we're doing. So we'll be progressing. We want to get on and make sure that the new arena, the new city centre is all built within the next 4 years. So that's the plan, and we'll be on site in about 6 months' time doing the arena.
That's great. Thank you so much. Thank you for joining us, and thank you all after the break. Liz Cairns will be back on the sofa, and we will be talking to Suzy Davies, AM for South Wales. Welcome back. I'm Rachel Hopkins. This is Liz Cairns, and Suzy Davies, AM for South Wales West, is with us.
Hiya. Thank you for staying with us.
Oh, not at all, lovely.
I'm going to go firstly. There's been a statement made by Cllr Harris that Conservatives, whether they understand or not, but do not believe that there is an actual problem with the children and the amount of food. We've got a video at the moment, and she will say herself what she's said, and then we can discuss it then and see what your thoughts are on it.
That's fine.
The fact is, they've cut the budgets to the Assembly, they've cut the budget to the local authority, and this is the kind of work that the local authority should have the money to do, but the government is not giving that money. The government doesn't see poverty and food poverty as an issue. When it is, it's a big issue in Swansea East, it's a big issue in Wales, it's a big issue right across the country.
So obviously it is a big issue.
Yes, and to be fair, I think Carolyn put it slightly differently from the way you did there as well, because it's ridiculous to suggest that Conservatives don't care about children. That's just madness. I think what she was talking about there wasn't completely correct either, because actually the Welsh Assembly as a whole does get more money from the UK government. It gets it in the form of a supplementary budget halfway through the term, and in fact there was a Welsh portion out of £2 billion towards social services only in the last 6 months. So there is new money coming into Wales for specific purposes. But I think she was talking about summer holidays and the difficulties that some families have, perhaps feeding their families, and that's not a new problem. I don't mean to minimise it in any way, but certainly when I was running holiday play clubs and after-school clubs, and we're talking 20 years ago now, we would have some families with children coming in who didn't pay for their lunch, and between us all we sorted that out so that the individual families and children weren't stigmatised in any way at all. And I think even though we're hearing a lot more about it, and I'm not saying that the problem hasn't increased either, but this isn't a new issue, and I think actually over-politicising it doesn't help at all, because if you look around, I appreciate Carolyn represents Swansea East, which is it's been in the same party's hands for years, if you want to politicise it slightly, why that part of Swansea isn't doing better, and to things like the City Deal and Jobs Growth Wales and all the other initiatives that come from both Welsh Government and the UK Government.
The problem was, as we have already discussed on the show previously, at the beginning of the summer holidays, there was a crisis with the food banks.
Oh, that's right, I did see that.
This is why I think so much now has been publicised with regards to the meals being offered during the school holidays and the fun days that they're calling it.
Oh yeah, well it's an important story. It's not a story. It's actually an important issue.
Yeah.
I think my point was it's not a brand new one, and the fact that society, if I can put it like that, helps so much in this is important, because we can't expect a government or a council to do absolutely everything. And you see the work that the churches are doing, not just in the Bonamine situation, but down in Gorsainon and Pontedilais, where I've been to visit some of these recently, where it's all under the radar. Nobody makes a big song and dance about it, and where the community really takes ownership of the issue. Then
I was going to say, do you think that the breakdown of some communities, the reason why it needs to be sort of publicised more, because years ago the communities would understand, there's a house down the street, they're struggling, we'll go and deal. Whereas these days we don't always know our neighbours don't know our neighbours, so maybe people haven't got the help that they used to have.
Possibly. I mean, people do tend to live a bit further away from their families, but I wouldn't rush to say that somewhere like Bonamine isn't a strong community. It absolutely is. I mean, and my wider question is why that particular part of Swansea hasn't been able to take advantage of the several economic promotion schemes that have gone forward, as I say, from both Welsh Government and the UK Government. So try not to make it party political here.
Well, I was going to say about not making it party political. Do you think, because you said it's not a new problem, that some parties or people using it to sort of be in the media as if they're doing good work, and whereas it's not anything different?
Oh, well, I certainly don't want to have any criticism of Carolyn Harris in this, because obviously she's helped. I mean, that particular food bank is now awash, from what I understand, which is great news for those people who need it. I think there needs to be a better understanding of how food banks are used and what they're for. And I mean, there has, shall we say, in the last 2 or 3 years been they have been used as a political football, and that doesn't really help the people who use them. So, I mean, the people, people have come to the Conservative Party and say, can you help us depoliticise this? Because it's actually very difficult for somebody like me, who happens to, be from a particular party, to talk about this without the immediate, I'm sure it's happening online as we're speaking now. What's this Tory doing talking about this? And that's ridiculous, because it excludes people like me then from actually helping to be part of a solution to the problem.
Another, which we need really a solution to a problem, is parents are being fined for their children not going to school. Now, how can, or what strategies could be implemented, do you think, that could help the parents to get those children to school? Because some of the fines that they are getting fined, they can't actually afford it. So they're rising or ending up, the worst scenario is in prison.
Well, this is what happens when you take a hammer to crack a nut, really. I mean, again, Welsh Government and the Welsh Assembly as a whole have run around this issue a few times. The Welsh Government had to change their mind, actually, on some guidance that was given as a result of support for the contrary view from Assembly members generally. So we do have a purpose. We can get government to change its mind. But it's the way that local authorities interpret the Welsh Assembly guidance on this. And I know Swansea's been in the news recently for a ridiculous number of fines when their neighbouring councils aren't finding anybody. And even though I understand that Welsh Government wants to do something to get persistent truancy down, and they've had some success in this actually, this isn't the way to do it, because those who can afford to take holidays in school time, for example, will do it because it's actually cheaper to pay the fine than to pay the extra cost of going on holiday.
A lot of it is to do with going on holiday, isn't it? It's not just with children that can't bother to go to school and play truant.
Well, but even that in itself is more complex than you're putting it, really, because children don't go to school for a variety of reasons.
Even health reasons.
Even health reasons. Yes, and actually, getting children being punished, not being allowed to go on school trips because they haven't had, 100% attendance records, when they've got a chronic illness that takes them out of school from time to time. And actually, it's down to, well, in this case, the local authorities to provide education at home for them if it comes to it. So they can't do this at the same time. So I'm very disappointed with the way Swansea's approached this.
Do you think there is a way that they could implement some type of strategy that can help, like I said, the parents?
Well, some of that's in place now. In schools in the more deprived areas, certainly the secondary schools, which is where the truancy tends to occur, really, you will find some of the school leaders working very, very closely with parents to make sure that their children who might struggle to come to school for a variety of reasons do get there. Their attendance record goes up, their attainment record goes up as well. These things aren't complicated to understand. But it's, I think actually schools working more closely with the families has got a success rate. I'm sure Swansea does it as well, but actually taking this level of stick to a problem is not the way to do it. And actually, I think some of those fines should be paid back, particularly when we've got really solid reasons for those children not attending school.
And quickly, I'm going to ask you, international rugby referee Nigel Owens, he said it is only fair people who settle in Wales see the children taught Welsh in school. Now, the Welsh Government has recently announced plans to invest an extra £4.2 million to support the teaching and learning of Welsh subjects through the medium of Welsh. What are your views? Because some people obviously are opposed to this, thinking that their education will be hindered.
Yes.
You're a Welsh speaker yourself, so I'd like to hear off you.
Well, I'm a Welsh learner. I think we shouldn't get this right, really, because I didn't grow up speaking Welsh at all.
The Welsh is brilliant, then, I must admit.
Oh, well, that's great. But the point is, actually, for people who are learning, it's not necessarily the quality of your Welsh to start with. It's the fact that you have a go in 2 languages to start with. And I cannot see on any planet where having 2 language skills can be a hindrance, which is how, unfortunately, the BBC chose to represent this in recent Newsnight coverage. Now, the cost of this and people's willingness to buy into this is quite complicated, because your language is a very personal part of your identity. But if you can be spending money on this, we need to spend it wisely and properly so it has the outcomes we're looking for. A lot of money has gone into trying to make us a bilingual nation, and has failed because people from non-Welsh speaking backgrounds have had a terrible experience of learning Welsh in schools. If their experience is better, and that's why Welsh Government's putting this money into teaching, then the desire and the reason for being bilingual becomes far more apparent. And we're talking about deprived areas earlier on. If you've got 2 languages, surely that's going to help with your social mobility.
Definitely. And brings that pride of Wales to everybody as well, doesn't it?
Yes.
Thank you so much to all our guests today for joining us on the show.
Next on Bay TV, we have our afternoon matinee movie. Today, it's the 1953 crime drama, The Limping Man, starring Lloyd Bridges.
See you then.